I'm going to call the Rules and Regulation Committee to order at this time, and since we have no returning chair, I will be acting as chair tonight. So the first item is to approve the June 27th minutes. If I can have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
A second. Okay. Any discussion? If not, all those approving, and I might add that the four members are Tia Bidwell, David Brandenburg, Steve McKee, and Jerry Hover. Those are the four members on the committee that are voted. So 4 voted. Okay, first item on the agenda is to elect a new chair for the committee, for the chair for the committee for this year, and I will entertain a motion from the floor for a chair.
I would like to nominate Jerry Hover. He has experience with the committee.
Okay, other nominations?
Just as a point of order, does this mean we should be turning this on?
It'll allow our guests to hear us better.
Just as a point of order, we're sort of carrying on where we were. I'm not sure we need to make a new motion. It was never tabled or anything like that. Killed or whatever.
It was tabled.
Well, it failed for lack of a vote. It had to be a positive vote, so if it doesn't pass, then it fails automatically.
So it starts over.
So it starts over. Okay.
Any other nominations? Can I have a motion that we cease nominations then?
Move to cease nominations.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
We
We're voting to cease
cease the
nominations.
nominations.
Okay. Jerry will be chair, and so Jerry, at this time, do you want to?
Just call for a vote.
Oh, I call for a vote. We just did. We didn't. Okay. Since we ceased, we have one nomination on the table, Jerry Hover. I asked for those accepting Jerry as your chair to raise your hand, please. Okay, thank you. Those opposed? And that's 4 votes, so nobody's seen. Okay. Jerry, do you want to take it from there, please?
Jerry, I prepared a slide. Make it a little bit easier to go over the next subject matter.
Okay, the next item on our agenda for tonight is a discussion regarding the proposed changes to Article 10, Section 2. These proposed changes would prohibit the casting of votes derived from the lots owned by the association in the elections for the Directors Association, votes to increase assessment, or any other elections. A motion or a discussion?
So there's been a lot of conversation back and forth as to what to include, what not to include, and additional changes. So I reordered the sentences just a little bit from your handout, just to make it a little bit easier. So you'll see the initial sentences that are not highlighted are actually the original before it was changed in 17. You then we'll see 2 sentences that are stricken, and those are the ones that state the association will be a member in good standing, and then that they can vote, that the POA can vote those lots. If you recall, in 17 or 18, the board of directors passed a motion in a board meeting not to cast those votes, but changing the governing documents makes that commitment a little bit stronger. So this would remove it. And then Doug felt that, and I don't want to speak for Doug, so you can jump in at any moment. Anytime you have governing documents that are silent on an issue, where it's not, if we just remove the 2 sentences, effectively the governing documents, the bylaw, is silent as to whether the POA can or cannot vote the lots. And since it doesn't say you can't, a future board could interpret that since it's silent on the matter, that they can. So Doug felt that having a clear statement that says votes derived from lots owned by the association will not be cast in election, that clearly states that they will not, and it's no longer silent on the issue. So we feel that this makes as strong a statement as possible within the authority of the board of directors that these votes will not be cast. Did I mess up anything?
No, it's great. Perfect. And remember, this is, you know, if the committee votes to pass this, it would still go to the full board for discussion and their consideration. This is not changing the policy, it's for a recommendation to the full board.
So further discussion.
Do we need to read this in entirety in the form of a motion?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea to do that. If you guys are good with the language, or if you have further discussion about
If
it.
I make a motion, then we can discuss.
Yeah.
I feel like it's less formal in this setting where you don't have to make a motion to discuss. I think that you can.
Okay, so we
speak
discuss
freely.
and then make a motion. Okay, I like the change. It says exactly what we want it to say. It doesn't leave anything out. It takes out unnecessary sentences, so keeping it as simple as possible. So I like it this way.
It appears to me that we have two different versions. Which version are you saying you like?
Okay, I like the version that our COO just handed out.
That was my recommendation. The only difference is the wording,
Order.
under the,
Yeah, all the words are the same. Tom just rearranged the order to make it
Yeah,
flow better.
It seemed like having the two sentences that were being stricken next to each other because the subject matter is directly connected. Sorry, I'm pointing here, I should be
Yeah.
pointing up here. That's why I reordered, and not to confuse anybody, but just to make it a little bit more straightforward.
didn't confuse me. I mean, it's got it right there.
does that order make a difference?
And like Tom said, the part that's unhighlighted, that's what it was before any changes back in 2017. And there was questions about, a lot of discussion, can we vote on them, can we not vote on them? There's always that question there. And as Tom indicated, we feel like by putting that affirmative language in there, that it removes that doubt.
So just as a matter of interest, there has been a court case in Arkansas that said if we wanted to, we could have. In which case we would write this differently, that would say we could.
It wasn't that definitive. I'll say that was still a gray area that the court didn't take up on the appeal, so they didn't hear it directly, that issue.
So that gets back to what Tom was saying about the way you word things. If you don't address it, it's like the teenager
Still-
that says, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do that.
Yes, exactly.
We've all had teenagers.
So we're all used to being it.
Oh, don't. We won't admit to that.
Does this in any way, taking out the association shall be deemed a member in good standing, does it in any way change the fact that the association is still deemed a member in good standing? That's in another section of the bylaws, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's address that.
It's in the policy, but we went back and forth on that as well, but we feel like votes deriving from lots indicates that, there are some rights that the PLA has by virtue of owning lots, but that we're not electing to, we're affirming and not electing to exercise those rights by voting.
Okay. Makes sense to me. I think this change on the screen is perfect.
And state law may be one thing, we can make it more restrictive. We can't make it looser than law, but we can make it tighter than law.
Correct.
Okay, if we move this on to the board as a recommendation, is there anything else, either in the declarations, the policies, the procedures, anything that this may also affect that we need to look at before we make this decision?
I've looked through the policies and bylaws, and I don't believe there's anything else that needs to be changed. I will double check again.
Oftentimes we make a change that affects something else, and I personally have not had the time to go through and make that check.
That's a very good point, because you're right, it does a lot of times affect other areas that we miss, and so I will double check that.
I've got a couple of other areas that it does affect.
Steve, I took your email.
You haven't seen this one. Oh, sorry. I just put it together, and so here it is. It basically builds on everything you said, everything Doug said, everything David said. It basically builds on it and confirms everything that was said. So basically, to give a little background to this discussion, as Tom mentioned, there was a couple of old boards, or very old boards, that said, you know, we're not going to vote these things because we believe it's unethical. And then subsequent to that, another board came along and said, well, we're going to vote them. And then after that, another board came along and said, well, we're not going to vote these things. So it seemed to me, and I would agree, that we should not vote them. I think it's unethical. I think that there's huge questions about, you know, whether the association is representing the lots owned per the membership. And then the discussion sort of became, should we do it 50-50? Should we do the last second and let Ty allocate the vote? And it just raised all sorts of questions. So I raised this point and suggested we change that verbiage. I know to a lot of members it's a huge issue, and it is to me as well. And so then, as Tia mentioned, there's another section, Policy 304, which basically has the same language that says, by virtue of its ownership of property, the POA is a member with the authorization to sponsor regular guests. Essentially, that's the same verbiage that's in the bylaw. So if we're eliminating one, my suggestion is we eliminate the second one. But then we have the problem.
That's why I mentioned it was still, you know, it was in the policies, and so it was still covered.
Right, right. So if we're eliminating the bylaws, it seems to me that we should, you know, eliminate that verbiage so that there's no confusion and we're consistent in the rules and the regs. And then back to Tom's point that, you know, which is basically a reason the whole thing, it needs to be explicitly mentioned or stated that, gosh, we're not going to vote these things. So, and then I was talking to a director, and it sort of dawned on me that, you know, the POA is a corporation. Well, we already have that. We already have that ruling, where we've got Policy 303-2, where it says membership cards for company or corporate-owned property, like the association. That's us. We already have that policy in place. And so, you know, I don't know what other corporations own property here. Maybe Walmart owns, you know, and they can come and use our amenities. Well, it's the same way with the POA. So we have the right to sponsor guests, And then, since it's sort of special, that's where that language should be, where votes deriving from lots owned by the association will not be cast in the election for directors or assessment increases or any other initiative. So, I worked through what it sounds like we're thinking of doing anyway, and these are my suggestions to move it all forward.
As a recommendation, I would like to, I'm not saying one way or the other regarding the additional, since you came up with the additional changes, and this is the first I'm seeing it.
But I apologize.
I just
Last minute.
I know that Doug, when he goes through these changes, any changes to our governing documents, he goes through them in extreme detail. He has a mini law library that he will take out statutes and go through them. So what may appear, what we have up here, what may appear to be a rather straightforward and simple adjustment, Doug actually has put a lot of time and effort and thought. And there are some times that you will actually consult with our attorneys at Kutak to get additional outside recommendations, suggestions, opinions, and so forth. So at the least, I would want to give Doug the time to contemplate these additional changes.
Absolutely, I mean, of course.
I wouldn't want to race into anything because, we went through 2 years ago of having to go through every single policy to clean up a lot of policies that were frankly poorly written years and years ago. So I don't want to race into anything, and I don't want to put him on the spot and go, is this okay right now? And you've had just a few minutes to read through it. I really, we want to make sure that in my opinion, this policy can stand for years, decades. That's our ultimate goal, is anytime we're changing our policies, they should have the strength to last a very long time. And that strength comes from Doug and his ability to review it and look at precedents and statutes and so forth. So I'd want to at least give him the opportunity to read through everything.
I concur.
I do think it's important to move forward with what's on the table tonight, because that, and go ahead and vote that to the board, because that is something that does need to be clarified and in there and complete. The other two, definitely let's have Doug look at it, because the policy and the bylaw, I would like to make sure, Doug, that if we have it written in a bylaw, does that overrule the policy, or does it need to be in the policy just to be written?
Yeah, the bylaws are higher in authority than the policies. These other two are policy discussions.
That being said, I make a motion to amend bylaws, Article 10, Section 2, as follows. To be entitled to vote in the election of directors of the association, a member must have been a member in good standing on March 31st of that year. To be entitled to vote in other initiatives/elections held by the association, a member must have been a member in good standing on the date of record that is established for that particular initiative/election by the association. Votes deriving from lots owned by the association will not be cast in elections for directors of the association, assessment increase elections, or any other initiative or election under the declaration of the association.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Further discussion?
I mean, I would suggest that it's going to be a duplication of time and effort to do one change that is going to trickle on down. In my opinion, we should just do it all at once. If it takes, I have no idea how long it will take, but just do it all at once.
Doug, on
Just a waste of time.
you see where it's initiatives/elections, and then towards the bottom, initiative or election.
That's supposed to be initiative or election.
Oh, did you change that and I didn't see it? So this should be,
Instead of a slash, it's border in both.
Should be a
it should be,
Take out the slash.
Yeah, read over.
I read it
Scrivener's error.
Autocorrect. That being said,
There's a motion to second.
Anyone have any further discussion? I'd have to interject that I think we're moving this much too quickly. Much of this we have just seen, or within the last couple of days. And adding the other to it, there has to be some time to make sure that we're doing the right things. But that being said, that whatever the committee decides, go from that standpoint.
Well, I agree with Jerry. It's not for moving too fast, but it's just,
I think we need to take a little bit more time. I don't realize that any changes is going to take at least a minimum of 2 board meetings, so that's 2 months. And if we don't do something tonight, basically 3 months from now. I don't see where that's going to hurt us in waiting that time period to make sure that we've got the right things that are done. Many of the policies that are written that are actually more SOP, standard operations procedures. Generally speaking, policies are very short and concise. How you implement those is part of the procedures. And I'm not suggesting that we go through and change everything. The thing, because we have put so many procedures into the policy, that's what makes it difficult. Because we can change procedures easily. We can change policies a little, somewhat easy. And bylaws take more effort because they affect more things. That's my 2 cents worth into it. Are we ready to have a vote?
and I just for clarity, so as to avoid any unnecessary rumors. You wish to delay because we want to make sure that we get it right. Your interest in delaying is not because you're against changing the policies which would prohibit the voting in the lots.
No, I'll make that very clear. I'm not against that by any means. I like what I'm seeing. I'm just not comfortable that we have crossed all the Ts and dotted the Is.
Totally fine.
Back into it. So, as far as my own vote would be, I made the motion the last time not to vote the lots. And I would still stay with that. And it's almost becoming a moot question, really, because we're dwindling down on lots that we own. Right now, the amount of lots that we own wouldn't make a hill beans difference in the vote. So let's get one thing out of our hair and make it clear to people that we're not going to vote those remaining lots that we have.
I agree with that, Doug and Tom and all the people working for us have done a very good job of getting that number of lots down. And I can't ever foresee where we will get anywhere near that kind of number of lots in our inventory in the future. But that being said, we've been chewing around on this for a couple of months, and I would like to get it out of committee, the motion that's on the floor. I'd like to get it out of committee and in front of the whole board and go from there. If the whole board doesn't like it, it's going to get thrown back at us. So, I'd like to go to the whole board and see what they think of it. What Steve's talking about, we take our time and we can look at that. Doug will have his say, and we go from there. So I'd like to go ahead and vote it on out of the committee to the board.
Any last discussions?
I'd say, cross the i's, dot the t's. I think these other policies are very closely associated, and if we do one, just do them all.
Well, I will go ahead and say now, I don't think these are related. I think they're very different topics you're talking about in different sections. So if this was to move forward with all three having to be voted together, I don't know that I could support that the way it's written right now. That's why I think there needs to be more discussion on the last two.
Sure.
And get, for the members' sake, this has been an issue for over a year since the last election, and the last assessment increase attempt. We all know that there's not enough lots that's going to be a difference, but it is on the members' mind, and they do want clarity, they do want it written. Let's get that part done.
And just so you're aware, if we were to bring all three, you would actually vote each individual. You don't vote in total, you vote individually, almost like the nominations for the committees. We vote those separately in case you may like one provision, but not the second. You may like the third. That allows you. You could even in this case, you could vote, I like sentence 4, but I don't like sentence 5. So you can break it down into smaller increments, but we never take it where we do wholesale changes all in one vote.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, we have a second. This is the motion that we're talking about, so that we understand that. And I'll call for a vote at this time, but the vote would be to move it to the full board for their discussion. Those in favor? Against?
Change your mind.
No, I haven't changed my mind at all on it. Moving it to the full board is still the time to make sure that we've got everything correct before it actually is approved and becomes law.
Fair enough.
Other member comments? What I would like to do is give a charge to the committee, that is to begin looking at many of the different things similar to what Steve has done on 3 different items. Knowing what people that you visit with constantly, the issues that are on their minds, are there things that we can look at that are in the current policies, manuals, declarations we all know are going to be very difficult to deal with, so I would rather not spend a whole lot of time on that now. But policies in particular, if there's things that need to be looked at, bring those forward at the next meeting so that we can put them onto an agenda to begin a systematic look at whatever it might be. The next item we need to do is decide pretty much on when and what time do we have meetings. Do you want to have a monthly meeting? Do you want to wait until we have items that we need to talk about? What's the pleasure of the committee?
You were on the committee last year. My understanding that it was called, meetings were called as needed.
That's correct.
So I think we've got something here that we're going to be
talking about and looking at, giving feedback. So probably we need to find a date for another meeting to talk about that. I would say should probably be after the GM meeting next month. So we'll get some feedback from other board members. You know, we'll know whether we're going to be looking at this again. So sometime.
Approximately 5:30, something like that.
Immediately after the GM meeting. I thought you meant, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Did I read you right, was it?
Tom, Doug, is that meet with your schedules?
That works.
We're-
We're good.
I'm not part of the committee, but I'll be here whenever you announce I'll be here.
I mean, you always are, and so I think we need to include
I will do my best.
opinions. So, any other suggestions?
This is just another point of order. I think we had a discussion the last time about, what was it? And then we took it to the committee, to the full board, and then it sort of came back up again.
We talked about the attendance issue.
But the attendance issue, the required attendance. So I sort of had a question, because, the same thing may happen again. I think it came up again. Where does that stand? Do we,
Yeah, please,
is that,
I want to finish our first topic, and that is setting the date and the time for our meeting. And to bring other things. So did you have any other suggestion on the time? Okay. So it appears then that we'll have our next meeting immediately following the next GM meeting. Okay? Now, questions, comments?
I'm just wondering about the process again. So for example, this will move to the board will discuss it, and then decide to either approve it or raise questions or push it back to the committee. Is that the three sort of short? Or deny the whole, okay. So basically there's about four directions it could take.
Ultimately, this is an advisory committee, so the board can accept the recommendations or modify or reject.
Okay.
They have, ultimately, the board has the adjudicatory authority. This committee does not.
So is the required attendance issue dead? Or is that more of a question for the board at a different time? Because I thought it sort of came up again, and again, I'm just asking process type questions.
If board members would like to reinitiate the conversation, we can add it to the agenda. We can cover it at the next GM meeting, the next work, it's at the discretion of the board. So we can reinitiate the conversation. But at this point, there are no proposals on the table.
There was no consensus by this committee to forward it to the board, so it died. So there was no action taken on it. So there's no recommendation from this committee to give to the board. So that's where it stands.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second.
Second.
Favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.